We'll get to that. To discuss these, Sally and I are joined by Alpesh from Perfinium Partners. Welcome. Good to see you. We'll start with the Independent. Why won't the world help us? I mean, the tide seems to be turning for now against the rebels as Gaddafi, pushes this onslaught. But it really does highlight the difficulty of the international community, what to do, how to do it, when to do it.
By the world, they mean the West, and the reason the West won't help, because look what happens when you invade countries for oil. Oil still goes to $110, and your country still ends up in an economic mess because your natives cause credit crunches and so on. So what's the point of invading countries for oil? But it's not just that we haven't got enough money in the West to help the Libyans. We certainly don't have the military appetite because we don't have the money, because oil isn't worth it. And who needs the perception? The West going into an Arab country, who needs any of that headache? But you're absolutely right. The world has not yet found a solution to when there is a humanitarian crisis, whether in African nations, whether in Middle East countries, what to do and how to do it. And sanctions are counterproductive because the man at the top causing the problems has already got his money. Even if you put sanctions on the people, you're only harming the people. You're not actually solving the problem.
But isn't part of the hesitation, sorry Sally, isn't part of the hesitation the fact that we don't know what the outcome could be? You impose a no-fly zone. What if Gaddafi prevails?
Well, it's only taken the West. It's only taken the West the best part of 60 years to work out that when you do get involved in these things, you actually don't know what's going to happen. You arm the rebels. What happens 30 years later? They start using the same armaments on your troops in any event, as has happened in Afghanistan. So yes, it's actually quite wise to stay well clear and say, look, if we do get involved on the Western side, it'll actually have the counterproductive impact, because it'll be seen as Western imperialism. So there is nothing for the West to do here, and it doesn't have a humanitarian solution. So terrible as it seems, you end up looking impotent, sitting on your hands.
Isn't it, should we not take it to the wider thing, though, and look at this humanitarian crisis to a certain extent and say, actually, isn't it now time to redefine the UN's role? To give the UN some responsibility, to give it a mandate, and to, as you said, put in a mechanism where we can react with humanitarian aid.
I have a board meeting this later today at the United Nations Association here in London, and we would love, as part of the UN mechanism, to be able to do something, to be able to go into countries where there are these crises. And it seems so simple. It seems in principle, yes, absolutely. Once you start working out the mechanism, the poor UN gets it in the neck for being impotent, for being a talking shop and so on. But the reality is there isn't enough money, there isn't enough political will, because it is composed of the countries that make it up, and they don't have the will to do anything.
Let's look at the Cengiz brothers and the being arrested with the collapse of this Icelandic bank. This is going to take some time to unravel, isn't it?
Who would have thought that with all the banks that collapsed due to the credit crunch over the last 2 years, and there were dozens in the US, we obviously heard of Lehman Brothers, but don't forget all the smaller ones, who would have thought that really the first set of arrests would have come due to Iceland? Of all the places. Apparently there was no alleged wrongdoing when it came to RBS, when it came to Halifax Bank of Scotland, when it came to Northern Rock, when it even came to Lehman Brothers. No wrongdoing whatsoever, but apparently there's alleged wrongdoing in relation to this Icelandic bank. You're absolutely right, it'll take years.
I detect a cynical tone here.
Well, it's great that somebody's doing something, if there is any wrongdoing, in relation to this. But what the heck happened for the last 3 years with everything else? You lose billions, there's alleged mis-selling, there's a massive global crisis. Apparently, nobody did anything wrong, though.
But Sally, isn't it interesting that just 24 hours ago, one of our lead stories was that the EU authorities are thinking of reducing the number of criteria for the stress test for the banking industry, and one would step back and say, hey, hang on, given the experience we've had in the past, is this something we should even be doing?
Oh, the stress tests were fake anyway. You've got to remember, with economics, economics is about expectations and perception. And you mustn't scare people by letting them know what's really going on. So you have very low bars with stress tests and say, oh no, don't worry, our banks are okay now. Because God forbid you tell them the truth, that actually banks may still be in a precarious situation. The world economy is still teetering on the brink of recession. We don't want to do that. We need to create that veneer of confidence, because the financial system is is by and large a contract.
Alpesh, you're making a lot of friends this morning. Let's move on to the Guardian, and of course this story out this morning. A million-strong planned a strike over pensions. I suppose everyone's waiting for this Hutton report and plans to scale back the pensions. It really is something that I'm sure many of our viewers this morning don't want to hear.
Well, it's an interesting point. Again, you talk about how to win friends and influence people. Strikes. The trick with strikes is you have to give the appearance of your threat being credible, because actually you don't want to go on strike, but you've got to give the appearance, but at the same time not show that you're gung-ho and that you're really looking forward to it. And how do you get that balance? Because you don't want to appear unpopular and lose the public. Now the problem is, at time of austerity, and we're not technically in a recession in the United Kingdom, but it feels like it, you're not going to get much public support. You might do for pay and for pensions when there's a booming economy, but in this environment you're not. And some of the talk from the unions has already misfired. It's gone way too much into trying to build up their credibility that we're willing to do this, so don't make us do it because we'll shut down the country. But actually the perception that's coming across is you're not going to win many friends, which means they're going to have to back off.
But is this the only way to plug the hole in public finances, making people work longer and receive less at the end of the day?
Sadly, pretty much, yes. You can either work longer or you can pay higher taxes and work for a shorter period of time. Whichever way you cut it, you're not going to like the outcome. And it's not your fault, but we, as in the state, is going to be taking a lot more of your money. And I'm surprised there haven't been more strikes in places like Spain, where they have a greater tradition of it, let alone the French. The French should be leading the way. They should be sort of burning sheep on the roads, but they're not doing it. So if the French don't do it, I can guarantee you British unions don't have it in them to do it.
They won't do it.
Exactly. Let's look at Ireland, though, again, and those austerity measures. And again, the Irish politicians have decided to take a pay cut. That's not unusual. The British politicians decided to do that. Is it all window dressing, though?
Why do heads of government get paid anything? Anywhere. I mean, I can understand why the Libyan leader gets paid billions, because obviously, you know, he's got an important country to run. But why on earth do Western heads of government get paid anything more than £1? Steve Jobs takes home, the head of Apple takes home $1. Head of government, you've got your food paid for and you've got your accommodation. So actually, if they want to really show that they're serious about the mess they're in Ireland and the bailouts that they need out of Europe, then the head of government, the Taoiseach, should be taking zero pay and saying, look, I'm leading the way because I don't need this money, and I'm going to be on the lecture circuit in 2-3 years anyway, and I'll make it up then. So it is window dressing. It's good that they're leading the way, but, you know, we're talking about somebody going from, I think it was €213,000 to €200,000. Is he really going to notice the difference? Is he going to miss it? I mean, you know, his in-state paid-for accommodation, and not bad accommodation either. Flights apparently are also covered.
David Cameron, are you listening? But what about Kate Moss and her cigarette? They can do all they can, very briefly though, and this just ruins it, doesn't it?
Well, it's not the cigarette that worries me, it's what the heck is she wearing that worries me. I mean, yeah, that's your bigger problem. It's the greatest advertisement for not smoking there ever is, because if that's what smokers look like, then, you know, all these young teenagers who are waking up and reading The Guardian as they go to school, looking at this role model, are thinking, my God, I don't want to smoke.
Alpesh, we're going to have to leave it there. Alpesh Patel, winning friends and influencing people this morning. That's our newspaper review.
Stay with us. We have more news and business. Goodbye.